Jonathan Majors as Kang is out, but then just who or what is in when it comes to Avengers 5? While we don't know for sure what the plans are with Jonathan Majors no longer as a part of the MCU, it seems likely that Marvel will need to fully pivot with this project. After all, Avengers 5 was originally titled as Avengers: The Kang Dynasty, but what would that be without Kang? Well, they could simply recast Kang. Some have theorized a more creative or more bold solution will likely come about. Just fully pivot. Drop the Kang storyline and do something entirely different. Honestly, I feel like this could be the shakeup that we actually kinda need, even though I do like Kang, and in terms of the story and character I did like what they were building with him in the MCU. But if we aren't going to have Kang as our main focus / main antagonist of Avengers 5, what will we have? What's left? Or what potentially could replace this mainline plot? The MCU has some time to still figure that out, and as for us, we all have our theories. Some think Doctor Doom might take Kang's place, and it's that simple. Others have been suggesting that an entirely different team or storyline could be used as the focus for this film. Some have even said these stories and teams have actually already had their seeds planted in recent Marvel Cinematic projects. With whatever is coming up next in Deadpool and Wolverine, I think a lot of people are expecting that the whole status quo at Marvel is likely going to change. Why do we think this? Because it seems as though we might be hitting the reset button in Deadpool 3, or at least doing, let's say, a soft reset and reconfiguration of our focuses and priorities in the MCU. The Fox X-Men movies will once again be referenced, but this time it will be in MCU canon, which is pretty crazy. What does this mean? Well, what some are thinking, it could mean that we are going to see a changing of the guards. Out with the old, in with the new, when it comes to X-Men at least. The fact that Secret Wars also might play a role here could mean that we'll see a complete restructuring of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That is what happened anyways when Secret Wars happened in 2015 in the comics at least. We got a whole new world out of it, and then afterwards a refresh somewhat on the multiverse, the mainline multiverse, after it was rebuilt by the Fantastic Four, with the project to do so spearheaded by Reed Richards and Molecule Man. There have just simply been too many references to this next one for it to not make some kind of appearance in the next Avengers film. I actually think instead of Avengers 5, we could get a completely new team known as the Young Avengers, so there will be no Avengers Kang Dynasty, it'll just be Young Avengers. The Young Avengers are a group of teenage and young adult heroes in the comics who are just coming into their own when they assemble. They are fans of the Avengers who band together to create their own superhero group. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we've already seen some of them appear, including Kate Bishop as Hawkeye, Eli Bradley, who goes on to become Patriot, Billy, the son of Wanda Maximoff, aka Scarlet Witch, who in the comics is known as the hero Wiccan, Cassie Lang, who becomes known as the hero Stature, and America Chavez. We've also been introduced to new heroes who could find a place on this team based on their experience level and their age range, namely Miss Marvel aka Kamala Khan. In the comics, Kamala is part of a different young hero team known as the Champions, but the Champions doesn't really have as much oomph to it as a superhero team name, and honestly we're missing some people for that team to work. We would also need Miles, we would need Nova, we just have more players from the Young Avengers, which makes me think that that is the team we'll be getting in regards to any Avengers lineups, and if anything, Miss Marvel will just be joining up with the Young Avengers. That is, of course, unless we go in a completely different direction. This would be quite different, but honestly I would be so into it. And we do have a few players in the MCU who are from this alternate Avengers team as well. This team is known as the West Coast Avengers. Some have theorized that this team could be where we head next with the MCU when it comes to the Avengers team. Now, the West Coast Avengers are an LA-based offshoot of the Avengers team, and some of the major players for the team have already been introduced, while other heroes not normally affiliated, like let's say Shang-Chi, have simply been based on the West Coast in the MCU. While Shang-Chi is not normally a team member in the comics for the West Coast Avengers, this doesn't mean that he couldn't be part of this team. He could end up simply joining because of where he was initially based in his film, in San Francisco. While no longer canon, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. also introduces Mockingbird, who's also on the West Coast Avengers, and other than that we have also had White Vision introduced, who actually first appears in that version of himself alongside his wife Scarlet Witch in West Coast Avengers issue number 45 in the comics. Some have theorized that if and when we get an Avengers 5 film, that is where we shall see the X-Men get to team up with the Avengers. Or is it possible instead of teaming up, they'll actually be enemies of one another. In the comics, there is a story that is famously known as Avengers vs. X-Men. It's a bit of a mixed bag overall, I'd say, but it's pretty cool in the sense that we get to see Marvel's biggest teams go up against one another. In Avengers vs. X-Men, the conflict is basically over the Phoenix Force. The X-Men have this belief that the Phoenix Force returning to Earth could actually be a good thing and could actually help them to reignite the mutant population, which somewhat is not doing pretty good at that point. It's dipped significantly after the mass extinction event on Genosha, which was then followed up by the events of House of M. So yeah, mutants were not doing so hot at that time. On the other side of the coin, the Avengers are actually hoping to destroy the Phoenix Force because the Phoenix hasn't inherently been a great thing when it's come about, which honestly, fair enough. Personally, I think this event would be a little awkward to fit in, but if you changed it up a bit, it could be possible. Although the one thing I will say is superheroes find reasons to fight all the time. Usually that is how a superhero team up actually begins, with some confusion which leads to conflict, then it resolves, and then it leads to a team up instead. So maybe we'll get something like that. We could just call it, you know, Avengers vs. X-Men, but it would be different. This is an even wilder theory than AV to me, but some are theorizing, and I gotta say, I think it's interesting, that where we could be headed next is entirely different than even just, you know, putting the X-Men in there. Instead, we could be zeroing in on one of the original MCU Avengers members and doing, get this, the World War Hulk storyline. Likely this theory primarily comes from the end of She-Hulk, where Jennifer brings her new love interest, Matt Murdock, to a family event and there meets her nephew for the first time, Scar. It's also been alluded to throughout She-Hulk that, you know, Hulk was off in space. That's a thing that gets mentioned, so that could be a thing. Scar is Hulk's son who was born on the planet Sakaar. Initially, Hulk did not know that Scar had survived as the planet was decimated when the ship which sent him to Sakaar exploded. In the comics, Hulk has not actually chosen exile for himself, but instead was basically forced into exile by a secret genius superhero group known as the Illuminati, who work behind the scenes to manipulate and control the world in order to protect it. And the Illuminati there exist in the main continuity, so not like how we saw in Multiverse of Madness. Also, if you think the Illuminati don't sound very heroic, you're kinda right. While they are made up of heroes, they have made some morally questionable decisions as a group throughout the years. One of those decisions, of course, being to exile the Hulk. Maybe not their best choice there. Hulk believed that the Illuminati who sent him off-world are also the ones responsible for his ship exploding, which decimated the planet of Sakaar, which he had actually fought to make his new home at that point, making a new life for himself with his romantic partner and co-ruler Kyra. When Kyra perished, she was pregnant with their son, so hence why Hulk assumed Scar was no longer alive. However, Scar does survive and eventually comes looking for his father with his own vengeful vendetta in tow, because yeah, he was alive and he kinda grew up pretty rough because Hulk just dipped. Granted, there is a lot that is different from this story in the MCU, so while World War Hulk would definitely be cool to see, it seems like we would need some more built up before we could actually get there, unless the story is going to be drastically changed for the MCU, which honestly could be possible. That's about it. I'm your host Amanda McKnight. Until next time, you stay nerdy.